The dusty road stretched out like a long brown ribbon under the bright sun. At the end of it sat a very big place, the army base. It looked like a small town all by itself, with many buildings and tall flags waving in the wind. This was a place for strong people, brave people, people who trained hard every single day. And today, a new person was coming to live there. Her name was Alara. She sat in the back of a big, rumbling truck, holding onto her bag tightly. The truck bounced and swayed, kicking up clouds of dust that smelled like dry earth. Alara peered out, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and a little bit of worry. Everything here was so much bigger than she had imagined. The fences were taller, the buildings were wider, and even the air felt different, full of important sounds like distant shouts and the hum of machines. When the truck finally stopped with a loud hiss of brakes, Alara jumped out. She smoothed down her uniform, which felt a little too big on her small frame. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. She wasn't very tall, and she wasn't very wide. In fact, compared to many of the other soldiers already walking around, she looked quite small. Some of them were like tall trees, with big, strong arms and legs. Others were like thick walls, solid and sturdy. Alara felt like a little sapling in a forest of ancient oaks. As she stood there, taking in the busy scene, other new soldiers also got out of the truck. They were mostly men, and almost all of them were much bigger than Alara. They laughed loudly, slapped each other on the back, and flexed their muscles. One man, with shoulders as wide as a doorway, gave a big yawn and stretched, his uniform pulling tight across his chest. Alara watched them, a small frown on her face. She knew she was strong in her own way, but she didn't look strong like them. A tall officer with a serious face came over to greet them. He had a clipboard in his hand and spoke in a booming voice that made Alara jump a little. He told them where to go, what to do, and all the rules of the base. As he spoke, his eyes swept over the new recruits, stopping for a moment on Alara. She could feel his gaze, and she imagined he was thinking the same thing everyone else probably thought. She's so small. Alara tried to stand a little taller, to make herself look more important. But it was hard. She was just built differently. Her strength came from quickness and clever thinking, not from huge muscles that bulged like rocks. She had trained just as hard as anyone, running miles and practicing moves until her body ached. She knew she was tough, even if she didn't look it. She picked up her bag, which felt heavy but not too heavy for her, and started to follow the other new soldiers. They walked past rows of barracks, past a big open field where some soldiers were running with heavy packs, and past a building that looked like a giant gym. Every few steps, she would see another soldier, and almost every time, they were bigger, taller, or wider than her. It was like she was walking through a land of giants. A group of soldiers was gathered near the gym, talking and laughing. As Alara walked by, one of them, a very big man with a thick neck and a loud laugh, pointed at her. He said something to his friends, and they all chuckled. Alara couldn't hear exactly what he said, but she knew it wasn't a compliment. Her cheeks felt warm, and she looked down at her boots. She wished she could disappear, just for a moment. This was going to be harder than she thought. It wasn't just about learning the ropes or doing the training. It was about proving herself, not just with her actions, but against the very first look everyone gave her. She took a deep breath. She had come here to be a soldier, a good soldier, and she wouldn't let her size stop her. She just had to show them. The first few days at the base were a whirlwind of new rules, new faces, and endless training. Elara ran, climbed, and crawled through obstacle courses, always trying her hardest. She lifted heavy things and practiced fighting moves. Even though she was smaller, she was quick and smart. She learned fast, and her movements were like a swift bird, darting and weaving. But no matter how well she did, she still felt the eyes on her, the quiet whispers. One afternoon, the new soldiers were gathered in a big training area. The sun was hot, and dust kicked up with every step. Today, they were going to meet Commander Thorn. Everyone knew about Commander Thorn. He was famous on the base, a true hero. He was known for being the strongest, the bravest, and the best fighter. Stories said he could lift a small car and run faster than a deer. When he walked into the training area, a hush fell over everyone. Commander Thorn was even bigger than the stories said. He was a giant of a man, with muscles that looked like they were carved from stone. His uniform fit him perfectly, showing off his wide shoulders and thick arms. He had a stern face, with eyes that seemed to see everything. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rumbling, like distant thunder. "All right, new recruits," he boomed, his voice echoing across the field. "I am Commander Thorn, and I am here to make sure you are ready for anything. This base needs strong soldiers, brave soldiers, soldiers who can protect others." He walked slowly along the line of new recruits, his eyes scanning each person. He stopped in front of the biggest, tallest men, nodding slightly. He looked at their arms, their chests, checking their strength. The men puffed out their chests, trying to look even stronger. Elara stood at the very end of the line, trying to look calm, even though her heart was thumping like a drum. Commander Thorn reached her. He stopped dead. His gaze, which had been so sharp and serious, changed. A small, almost invisible frown appeared on his face. He looked Elara up and down, from her boots to the top of her head. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just looked. "And who is this?" he asked, his voice still deep, but now with a hint of surprise. He wasn't talking to Elara, but to the officer standing next to him. The officer quickly looked at his clipboard. "Sir, this is Recruit Elara. She just joined this week." Commander Thorn chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that wasn't very friendly. He looked at Elara again, but this time his eyes seemed to be judging her, weighing her. Elara felt very small under his stare. She tried to meet his eyes, to show him she wasn't afraid. Then, Commander Thorn spoke directly to her, and his words felt like a cold splash of water. "You're too weak for combat, soldier," he said, his voice loud enough for many nearby recruits to hear. "Look at you. You're barely bigger than a twig. This isn't a place for playing games. This is a place for fighting. Real fighting. You won't last a day out there." Elara's face grew hot. Her stomach twisted into a knot. She could feel all the other soldiers looking at her, and she imagined them nodding, agreeing with Commander Thorn. It was exactly what she had feared. He hadn't even seen her train, hadn't seen her fight, and he had already decided she was useless. "Sir?" Elara started, her voice a little shaky, but she tried to make it firm. "I've trained hard. I am strong." Commander Thorn laughed again, a louder, dismissive laugh this time. "Strong? Strong like what, a kitten? Look, I'm not trying to be mean, recruit. But combat is serious. It needs real power. You simply don't have it. You'd be a danger to yourself and to anyone trying to protect you. You're too weak for combat." He turned away from her then, as if the conversation was over, as if she wasn't even worth another second of his time. He continued walking down the line, talking to the other recruits, giving them advice, but he didn't look at Alara again. The other soldiers shifted uncomfortably, some looking at Alara with pity, others with a knowing look that said, "He's right." Alara stood frozen, her hands clenched into tight fists. Her heart was no longer thumping, it felt cold and heavy in her chest. The words, "too weak for combat," echoed in her ears. It was a terrible thing to hear, especially from the base's biggest hero. But with the hurt, a new feeling began to bubble up inside her. It was a hot, fiery feeling. It was anger. She wasn't weak, and she would show him. She would show everyone. The sting of Commander Thorne's words stayed with Alara long after he had walked away. Too weak for combat. The phrase buzzed in her ears like an angry bee. She could still feel the heat in her cheeks, the shame of being dismissed in front of everyone. It hurt more than any scraped knee or tired muscle from training. She had always known people might judge her size, but to hear it from someone so important, someone she was supposed to look up to, felt like a punch to her heart. Later that evening, in the quiet of the barracks, Alara sat on her bunk. The other new soldiers were talking softly, some already asleep. She didn't join in their chatter. Her mind was replaying the scene with Commander Thorne. Each time the sadness grew, making a heavy knot in her chest. Was he right? Was she truly too small, too weak to be a soldier? A tiny voice inside her whispered doubts. Maybe she should just give up, find a different job on the base, something less important, less dangerous. But then, the sadness began to change. It didn't just sit there anymore. It started to burn, slow and steady, like a small fire. This fire was anger. How dare he say that? How dare he judge her without seeing what she could do? He hadn't seen her wake up early every morning to run extra miles. He hadn't seen her push through pain when her arms felt like jelly. He hadn't seen her practice her moves over and over until they were perfect. He only saw her outside, her size, and made a quick, unfair choice. The anger grew, pushing away the sadness and the doubt. It was a strong, hot feeling that made her hands clench into fists again. She wasn't weak. She knew it in her bones. She had always been told she was too small for things, too small to play certain games, too small to carry big boxes, too small to join the army. And every single time, she had proven those people wrong. This time would be no different. A spark of an idea flickered in her mind, then grew into a bright flame. She wouldn't just prove him wrong in her mind. She wouldn't just work harder in secret. She would show him. She would show Commander Thorne and everyone else on the base that she was strong, that she was capable, that she was a soldier, through and through. She closed her eyes and pictured Commander Thorne's face, the way his lips had curled into a dismissive smile. A fierce determination settled deep inside her. This wasn't just about her pride anymore. It was about what was fair. It was about showing that strength came in many forms, not just big muscles. It was about proving that a small person could be just as mighty, or even mightier, than a giant. Alara opened her eyes, and the doubt was gone. The sadness had vanished, replaced by a quiet, burning resolve. She would not let his words break her. Instead, she would use them. They would be the fuel for her fire. She would train even harder, smarter. She would watch, learn, and plan. She started thinking about how she could do it. How could she, a small new recruit, possibly show the great Commander Thorne that he was wrong? He was the strongest after all. He was the hero. But Alara knew something important. Strength wasn't just about how much you could lift. It was about how smart you were, how quick you were, and how much heart you had. And Alara had plenty of heart. She lay awake for a long time, not sleeping, but planning. Her mind raced with ideas. She thought about different kinds of training, different ways to use her speed and agility. She thought about how to trick someone bigger, how to use their own size against them. A small smile touched her lips in the darkness. Commander Thorne had made a mistake. He had judged her too quickly, and she was going to make sure he knew it. She would show him. She would beat him. The next morning, Alara felt a new kind of energy. The anger from the night before had settled into a quiet, strong fire inside her. She woke up before anyone else, did her usual exercises, and then added some extra ones she had thought of in the dark. She practiced her quick movements, imagining how she could dodge a bigger person. She worked on her balance, picturing how she could trip someone without using much force. Her plan was forming. After breakfast, the soldiers were dismissed to their different training groups. Alara knew what she had to do. Her heart was beating fast, a little drum in her chest. But her mind was clear. She walked with purpose across the base, heading towards the main training office where Commander Thorne often worked. Each step felt important, like she was walking towards a very big test. When she reached the office, she took a deep breath. She knocked firmly on the door. A deep voice from inside said, "Enter!" Alara pushed the door open and stepped inside. Commander Thorne was sitting at a large desk, looking at papers. He was even bigger up close, filling the chair. He looked up, his stern eyes meeting hers. For a moment, he didn't seem to remember who she was. Then, a flicker of recognition and a hint of that dismissive look crossed his face. "Recruit Alara, isn't it?" he said, his voice flat. "What do you want? I'm busy." Alara stood tall, trying to make herself seem bigger than she was. She looked him straight in the eye. "Sir," she began, her voice steady even though her knees felt a little wobbly. "I came to ask for something important." Commander Thorne leaned back in his chair, crossing his massive arms over his chest. He looked annoyed. "Important? What could a new recruit possibly have that's so important? If this is about your bunk or the food, you can talk to your sergeant." "No, sir," Alara said, taking another breath. "It's about what you said yesterday." His eyebrows rose slightly. "What I said yesterday? Ah, yes. About you being too weak for combat. I meant it, recruit. It's for your own good. I don't want to see anyone get hurt unnecessarily." "Sir, you said I was too weak without even seeing me fight," Alara continued, her voice gaining strength. "You judged me only by my size. I believe that is unfair." Commander Thorne chuckled again, the same dismissive sound she remembered. "Unfair? Combat isn't fair, soldier. It's about who's stronger, who's tougher, and you simply don't have the build for it." "With all due respect, sir," Alara said, her resolve firming. "This was it. I am asking for a chance to prove you wrong. I am asking for a special training fight. With you, sir." The office went silent. Commander Thorne stopped chuckling. His eyes widened slightly, and he stared at Alara as if she had just grown a second head. He slowly uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, his expression a mix of disbelief and something like amusement. "Did I hear that right, recruit?" he asked, his voice low. "You want to challenge me, Commander Thorne, the strongest fighter on this base? You, a little. Twig, want to fight me?" Alara didn't back down. "Yes, sir. I believe I can show you that I am not too weak for combat. I believe I can show you that strength comes in many forms. I am asking for a fair chance to prove myself." Commander Thorne looked at her for a long moment, a strange smile slowly spreading across his face. It wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that showed he found her request very funny. He probably thought she was crazy. "A special training fight," he repeated, shaking his head slightly. "With me? In front of the whole base, I suppose? To make a show of it?" Elara nodded. "Yes, sir, if that is what it takes." He leaned back again, a big laugh starting to bubble up in his chest. "Well, I'll be," he said, still laughing. "A brave little soldier, aren't you? Or perhaps just a foolish one." He looked at her, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "All right, Recruit Elara. You want to fight? You've got one. But don't come crying to me when you realize how mistaken you are." Commander Thorne's booming laugh filled the office, making the papers on his desk tremble a little. He slapped his big hand on his knee, still shaking his head in amusement. "A fight with me, little soldier? You've got guts, I'll give you that. Or perhaps you're just a bit mad." He wiped a tear of laughter from the corner of his eye. Yes, a public fight. That's a grand idea. It'll be a good lesson for all the new recruits. Show them what real strength looks like, and what happens when you think you're tougher than you are. He stood up then, his huge frame casting a shadow over Elara. He looked down at her with a grin that wasn't unkind, but full of sure victory. "Don't get me wrong, Recruit Elara," he said, his voice deep. "I admire your spirit. But bravery won't make you strong, and it certainly won't help you against me." He puffed out his chest a little, making his uniform stretch. "I've been in more real fights than you've had hot meals. I've trained for years. I am the strongest on this base. You'll be lucky if you last 5 seconds." He clearly saw this as a joke, a fun little show. He probably imagined himself gently pushing her aside and then giving a speech about knowing your limits. He didn't see Elara as a threat, not even a tiny one. He saw her as a chance to teach a lesson to all the new, eager soldiers about the harsh facts of combat. "I understand, sir," Elara replied, her voice calm, even though inside her heart was still doing a wild dance. She wouldn't argue with him now. She would let his laughter and his easy confidence be her secret weapon. He was underestimating her, and that was exactly what she needed. Commander Thorne waved a dismissive hand. "Good. Now, go tell your sergeant. We'll set it up for tomorrow afternoon, the big training yard. Everyone can watch. It'll be a good show." He chuckled one last time. "Don't forget to stretch, little one. You'll need it." Elara saluted, turned, and walked out of the office. She could still hear his faint laughter behind her. But it didn't hurt her anymore. It just made her even more determined. He thought it would be easy. He thought she would last 5 seconds. She would make him eat those words. News of the challenge spread across the base like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone was talking about it. "Did you hear? That new little recruit, Elara, challenged Commander Thorne. She must be crazy. Thorne will finish her in a blink." Most soldiers just shook their heads, feeling sorry for Elara or thinking she was very foolish. They admired her bravery, but they couldn't imagine her winning. Commander Thorne was a legend. Some of the other new recruits looked at Elara with wide eyes. "Are you really going to fight him?" one asked, amazement in his voice. "He's like a mountain." Elara just nodded. "I have to try," she said. She didn't explain her plan. She didn't say she thought she could win. She just let them think what they wanted. Let them all believe it would be an easy win for Commander Thorne. That would make her victory even more surprising. The rest of the day, Alara went about her training as usual, but with an extra fire in her belly. She watched Commander Thorn from afar during their shared training time. He moved with such power, such force. He was truly a mighty soldier, but he was also big. And sometimes, being big could be a problem. It could make you slower. It could make you less agile. These were the things Alara would use. She focused on her speed, her balance, her ability to see an opening where others might not. She thought about how a small stone can trip a giant. She wasn't planning on matching his strength. She was planning on outsmarting it. As the day ended and the sun dipped below the horizon, Alara felt ready. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had a plan. And Commander Thorn, laughing and confident, had no idea what was coming. He thought he would win with ease, and that was his biggest mistake. The afternoon sun shone brightly on the big training yard. It was usually a place for drills and practice, but today it looked like a giant outdoor theater. Word had spread like wildfire, and by the time the hour of the fight arrived, almost the entire base had gathered. Soldiers from every unit, old and young, tall and short, stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a wide circle around the designated fighting area. There were officers, sergeants, and even the cooks and mechanics had come to see the spectacle. A buzz of excited chatter filled the air. Everyone was talking about the fight, but not many were talking about it as a real contest. It was more like watching a small bird try to fight a bear. People whispered and pointed, their eyes mostly on Alara. She stood at one side of the training area, wearing her standard uniform, looking even smaller in the wide open space. She felt every single eye on her, 1,000 pairs of eyes, all curious, some pitying, but mostly all sure of what was about to happen. Can you believe she actually challenged Commander Thorn? One soldier whispered to another, shaking his head. She's got spirit, I guess, his friend replied. But spirit won't stop Thorn. He's going to wipe the floor with her in 10 seconds flat. 10 seconds? You're being generous. 5, maybe. A third voice chimed in, and they all chuckled. No one, not a single person in the large crowd, thought Alara had a chance. Commander Thorn was a legend, a hero of the base, known for his incredible strength and fighting skills. Alara was just a new recruit, small and quiet. It was like a story from a children's book, except everyone expected the giant to win, and quickly. Then, Commander Thorn himself walked into the training area. A cheer went up from the crowd. He was a truly impressive sight. His uniform was crisp, his shoulders broad, and he moved with a powerful, easy confidence. He gave a wave to the crowd, a big, friendly smile on his face. He looked like he was about to enjoy a pleasant afternoon stroll, not a serious fight. He saw Alara across the field and gave her a small, confident nod, as if to say, "Let's get this over with, little one." Alara met his gaze, but she didn't nod back. Her face was calm, her eyes focused. Inside, her heart was still beating fast, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from a quiet, burning excitement. She had planned this. She had imagined this moment. She was ready. An officer stepped into the middle of the circle. "Attention, everyone," he called out, his voice clear and strong. "Today, we witness a special training exercise between Commander Thorn and recruit Alara. This is a demonstration of combat readiness. The goal is to show skill and technique, not to cause serious injury. The fight ends when one combatant is unable to continue or yields. Are both combatants ready?" Commander Thorn stepped forward, his smile still wide. "Ready, sir," he boomed, his voice full of cheer. He looked at Alara, as if waiting for her to say something small and timid. Alara took a deep breath. "Ready, sir?" she said, her voice clear and steady, surprising some of the soldiers closest to her. The officer nodded. "All right then, begin." The crowd leaned forward, a collective gasp and hush falling over them. They expected a quick, maybe even funny end to the challenge. They expected Commander Thorn to make a swift move, and Alara to be on the ground in moments. Everyone was ready to see the strongest soldier on the base prove his point. They were ready to see Alara lose, and lose quickly. But Alara had other plans. "Begin!" The officer's voice rang out, cutting through the silence of the crowd. Commander Thorn, still smiling, took a slow step forward. He stretched his big arms as if warming up for a light exercise. He probably expected Alara to charge at him, or maybe just stand there, frozen with fear. But Alara didn't do either. Instead, she moved like a flash of lightning. Before Thorn could even fully straighten up, Alara darted to his side, quick as a hummingbird. She didn't try to hit him with a big punch. She knew that would be useless against his massive frame. Her plan was different. Thorn, surprised by her speed, tried to turn, his big body moving a little slower than Alara's small one. He swung a powerful arm, a punch that could knock out a bear. But Alara was already gone, ducking under his arm and slipping behind him. The crowd gasped. They had expected a quick takedown, not this sudden dance. Thorn grunted, annoyed. This wasn't going as he thought. He spun around, trying to catch Alara, but she was a blur of motion, always just out of his reach. She moved in tight circles, always looking for an opening. She was like a tiny, buzzing fly around a big, slow bear. Thorn lunged, trying to grab her, but Alara used her quickness. She ducked and weaved, her feet barely touching the ground. She wasn't fighting with strength, she was fighting with smarts. She used his size against him, making him swing wildly, making him turn quickly, using up his energy. Each time he missed, a small murmur went through the crowd. They were starting to realize this wouldn't be a 5-second fight. Alara saw her chance. As Thorn overextended a punch, she slipped under his arm again. Instead of just running, she used her shoulder to gently bump his side, just enough to make him stumble a little. Then, in one fluid motion, she grabbed his arm and used his own forward movement to spin him around, forcing him to take a few clumsy steps to regain his balance. She didn't hurt him, but she showed him that she could move him, even a giant like him. Thorn's smile was gone now. His face was starting to look red. He was breathing a little harder. This was more work than he had planned. He had expected to just stand there and let her bounce off him. But Alara wasn't bouncing. She was moving. He charged at her again, this time with more anger. He was relying on his brute force. Alara waited until the last second. Just as he was about to grab her, she dropped to one knee, letting his arms swing harmlessly over her head. Then, she quickly pushed off the ground, using her legs to spring up and backward, creating distance between them. The crowd was no longer whispering. They were completely silent, their eyes glued to the two fighters. They had never seen Commander Thorn struggle like this, not even in practice. And they had certainly never seen a new recruit, especially one as small as Alara, move with such cleverness and grace. Alara kept moving, always circling, always looking for a weakness. She saw that Thorn, in his anger, was leaving his sides open. He was focused on hitting her with big, slow swings. She knew she couldn't match his power, but she could use her speed to be where he wasn't. She was a master of evasion, a tiny whirlwind that he couldn't quite catch. He lunged one more time, his massive hand reaching for her. This time, Elara didn't just dodge. As his hand swept past her, she quickly grabbed his wrist, not to hold him, but to guide him. She twisted her body, pulling his arm in a direction he didn't expect, throwing him off balance even more. He stumbled, his feet getting tangled. He was losing his rhythm. And Elara, quick as a cat, was ready to take advantage. She wasn't strong like him, but she was smarter, faster, and much more agile. And that was making all the difference. The air in the training yard grew thick with tension. Commander Thorn, who had started the fight with a cheerful, confident grin, now had sweat beading on his forehead. His face was no longer amused. It was tight with frustration and surprise. He had expected a quick, easy victory, a simple lesson. Instead, he was being outsmarted by a recruit he had dismissed as a twig. Elara continued her dance, a constant moving target. She didn't try to trade punches with him, which would have been foolish. Instead, she focused on quick, sharp movements, always just out of his reach. Each time he swung his massive arms, Elara would duck, weave, or spin away, making him waste his energy. He would lunge forward, and she would quickly step back, pulling him off balance. "Come here, little one." Thorn grunted, his voice rough with effort. He was breathing heavily now, his chest heaving. His movements, which had been so powerful at the start, were becoming slower, a little less precise. His big muscles, used to quick bursts of strength, were tiring from the constant chasing and swinging at empty air. The crowd watched in complete silence, their mouths slightly open. They had never imagined such a thing. Commander Thorn, the great hero, was struggling. He looked like a frustrated bear trying to catch a nimble mouse. The surprise on their faces was clear. Many of them had known Elara for only a few days, and their first thought had always been about her small size. Now, they were seeing something entirely different. A soldier with incredible speed and a very smart plan. Elara noticed Thorn's breathing. It was getting heavier. His big arms were moving slower, and he was taking longer to recover after each swing. His eyes, which had been so sharp, now looked a little cloudy with tiredness and confusion. He was getting frustrated, and that was making him make mistakes. She saw an opening. As Thorn tried to grab her with both hands, a slow, sweeping motion, Elara didn't just dodge. She stepped inside his guard, closer than she had been before. This was a dangerous move, but she knew it was time. She quickly wrapped her arm around one of his, not to hold it tight, but to use it as a lever. Then she quickly spun, pulling him with her own momentum. Thorn, caught off guard, stumbled again. His feet, which were usually so steady, seemed to betray him. He was a powerful engine, but Elara was like a clever mechanic, finding the loose screws. He tried to brace himself, but his body was just too big, too used to brute force to adapt to such quick, unexpected movements. "Whoa," someone in the crowd whispered, a voice of pure astonishment. Thorn let out a roar of frustration. He wasn't just tired, he was angry that he couldn't land a single hit on this small, darting soldier. He swung wildly again, a big, clumsy punch that missed Elara by a mile. She easily dodged, but this time she didn't just step back. She used the force of his swing against him. As his arm went past, she gave a quick, firm push on his elbow, sending him spinning around even more. He was truly off balance now, wobbling on his feet like a giant tree about to fall. His chest heaved, his face was bright red, and his eyes darted around, trying to find her. But Elara was already in position, ready for the final move. She had worn him down, not with strength, but with endless movement and cleverness. Commander Thorne, the mighty hero, was tired, frustrated, and completely surprised. He never thought this fight would last more than a few seconds, let alone turn into such a struggle. Commander Thorne was swaying, his powerful body struggling to keep upright. His chest heaved with every breath, and his eyes, usually so sharp and confident, were now wide with disbelief and exhaustion. He looked at Alara, panting, completely stunned that this small recruit was still standing, and that he hadn't managed to land a single hit. He had underestimated her deeply, and now he was paying for it. Alara saw his weariness. She saw the open space around him, how his defenses were down because he was so tired and frustrated. This was her moment. She had trained for this. She had imagined this. She took a quick, deep breath, her own body feeling the strain of the constant movement. But her mind was clear and focused. Thorne, in a final desperate burst of strength, lumbered forward, trying to grab her. His arms moved slowly, heavily, like tree trunks. He thought if he could just get his hands on her, the fight would be over. But Alara was quicker. As his hands reached for her, she didn't just dodge. She dropped to one knee, letting his arms pass over her head. Then, in a move she had practiced countless times in her mind, she swiftly slid one foot behind his ankle. It wasn't a powerful kick, but a perfectly placed trip. At the same time, she pushed lightly on his leg with her other hand, using his own forward momentum. Commander Thorne's eyes widened even more. He tried to catch himself, but his body was too big, too tired, and too far off balance. He wobbled for a moment, a look of pure shock on his face, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Then, with a loud thump that seemed to shake the very ground, the mighty Commander Thorne fell. He didn't fall hard, as Alara had made sure the move was safe, but he was definitely on the ground, his back against the dusty earth. A gasp, loud and sharp, ripped through the silent crowd. For a second, no one moved, no one spoke. They just stared, their eyes jumping from the small figure of Alara standing upright to the giant figure of Commander Thorne lying on the ground. The great, unbeatable hero of the base, on the ground, beat by the too-weak-for-combat recruit. Alara stood over him, her chest heaving, but a triumphant spark in her eyes. She hadn't used brute strength. She had used smarts, speed, and precision. She had won. Commander Thorne lay there, blinking up at the sky, still trying to understand what had just happened. He lifted his head slightly, looking at Alara, a strange mix of emotions on his face. Shock, disbelief, and a grudging respect. He had been so sure. So sure. The silence lasted for another heartbeat, then another. It was almost deafening. And then, slowly at first, a single clap echoed across the yard. Then another and another. Soon the entire base erupted in a thunderous roar of cheers and applause. It wasn't just clapping. It was a burst of excited shouts, whistles, and stamping feet. Everyone was on their feet, yelling, their faces lit up with wonder and excitement. They had come to see a quick show, a lesson about weakness. Instead, they had seen something truly amazing. They had seen the underdog win, not by being stronger, but by being smarter and faster. Alara had not just won a training fight. She had won the respect of the entire base in one clever, surprising move. Commander Thorne, still on the ground, could only watch, his earlier laughter replaced by a deep, humbling silence. The thunderous cheers of the base filled the air, a wall of sound that vibrated through Alara's very bones. She stood there, chest heaving, a triumphant smile finally breaking across her face. Commander Thorne lay on the ground, still blinking, the dust clinging to his uniform. He slowly pushed himself up, his eyes never leaving Alara. The surprise was still clear on his face, but now, mixed with it, was something new and powerful: respect. He sat up fully, then slowly got to his feet. He brushed off his uniform, his gaze steady on Alara. The crowd quieted down a little, eager to hear what the great Commander Thorn would say after such an unexpected defeat. Commander Thorn walked slowly towards Alara. He stopped right in front of her, his massive frame towering over her small one. Alara stood her ground, meeting his gaze. She had faced his anger and his dismissive laughter. Now she was ready for whatever he had to say. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Then a slow smile, a real smile this time, spread across his face. It wasn't the amused, condescending smile from before. This was a smile of genuine admiration. "Recruit Alara?" he said, his voice still deep, but softer now, full of wonder. I was wrong. Completely wrong. He took a step closer, his voice carrying clearly over the still buzzing crowd. "I judged you by your size. I thought you were too weak for combat. I thought this would be a simple lesson for you and for everyone else." He shook his head slowly. "But you, little soldier, you just taught me a lesson, a very important one." He clapped a huge hand gently on Alara's shoulder. It was a gesture of respect, not of force. "You are not weak, Alara. You are incredibly strong. Not with brute force, no, but with quickness, with cleverness, and with a heart as big in Commander Thorn's words. You are incredibly strong. Not with brute force, no, but with quickness, with cleverness, and with a heart as big and brave as any soldier I've ever seen," rang out across the training yard. His praise was like a warm wave washing over Alara, wiping away all the hurt and doubt she had felt. It was more than just winning the fight. It was being truly seen, truly recognized. As Commander Thorn stepped back, a huge roar erupted from the soldiers. It wasn't just clapping anymore. It was a full-blown celebration. Everyone was shouting Alara's name, cheering for her with all their might. They threw their hats in the air, clapped their hands, and stomped their feet. The sound was deafening, a joyful noise that echoed across the base. The soldiers rushed forward, breaking the circle they had formed. But they didn't rush at Commander Thorn. They rushed towards Alara. The new recruits, who had watched with wide eyes and open mouths, were now pushing their way to the front, eager to get close to her. "Alara! Alara!" they chanted, their faces bright with excitement. A few moments ago, they had seen her as the little twig, the one who was too weak. Now, their eyes shone with admiration. They looked at her not just as a brave soldier, but as a hero. She had shown them that being different wasn't a weakness. She had shown them that strength could come in many packages. She had proven that smarts and determination could overcome even the biggest challenges. One of the new recruits, a man who had laughed at the idea of her fighting Thorn, pushed through the crowd. His face was red, but not from anger. It was from excitement and a little bit of embarrassment. "Alara, that was amazing," he shouted, giving her a thumbs up. "I never thought. You were incredible." Another soldier, a seasoned veteran who had seen many fights, clapped her on the back, a big smile on his face. "Well done, recruit. That was a masterclass. Never seen anything like it." Even the officers, who usually kept a stern face, were smiling and nodding. They looked at Alara with a new respect, recognizing the rare talent and spirit she possessed. She hadn't just beaten Commander Thorn. She had inspired everyone. Alara felt a warmth spread through her. This was what she had hoped for, even though she hadn't known it. Not just to prove Thorn wrong, but to earn the respect of her fellow soldiers, to be seen as one of them, a valuable part of the team. She looked around at the cheering faces, at the smiles and the open admiration. She saw the doubts wiped away, replaced by a new understanding. They no longer saw a small girl. They saw a skilled fighter, a clever strategist, and a brave heart. Commander Thorne, standing a little to the side, watched the scene unfold. He had a proud look on his face, a big, genuine smile. He had been humbled, but in a good way. He knew he had made a mistake, and he was happy to admit it. He raised his hand, and slowly the cheers began to quiet, though the excitement still buzzed in the air. He then pointed at Elara. "Listen up, everyone," he boomed, his voice powerful once more. "Recruit Elara here has shown us all today what it truly means to be a soldier. Size means nothing if you have the heart and the brains to back it up. She is a true warrior." More cheers erupted, even louder than before. Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, but it was a happy blush. She had come to this base feeling small and judged. Now she stood tall, surrounded by the cheers of her comrades, a true hero in their eyes. The day of the fight changed everything for Elara. The cheers and shouts of the soldiers echoed in her memory, a constant reminder of her victory. But more than the victory, it was the change in how people looked at her that truly mattered. The whispers about her size didn't disappear completely, but they were now mixed with words of wonder and respect. No one dared to call her too weak for combat ever again. From that day on, Elara was not just another new recruit. She was Elara, the soldier who had beaten Commander Thorne. When she walked through the base, heads turned, but not with judgment. Instead, soldiers would nod at her, some offering a smile or a word of encouragement. The new recruits looked at her with awe, seeing her as a shining example of what was possible, no matter how small you were. Her training sessions changed too. Instead of being overlooked, she was now watched closely. Other soldiers, even some older ones, would ask her for advice on her quick moves and clever dodges. Commander Thorne himself became one of her biggest supporters. He often sought her out, not to challenge her, but to discuss fighting strategies. He learned from her, just as she learned from him. He even started telling stories about her fight to new groups of recruits, always ending with a booming laugh and the words, "Never judge a book by its cover, especially not a soldier." Elara became a teacher in her own way. She showed others that strength wasn't just about big muscles, but about smart thinking, speed, and a brave heart. She helped some of the bigger, slower recruits learn how to use their weight and power more effectively, while also teaching them to be quicker on their feet. She became a bridge between different types of strength, showing everyone that a good team needed all kinds of fighters. Her confidence grew with each passing day. She knew she belonged. She knew she was a valuable part of the army base. The heavy knot of doubt that had once lived in her stomach was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady pride. She still worked hard, pushing herself in every exercise. But now she did it with a different kind of joy. She wasn't trying to prove herself anymore. She was honing her skills, becoming an even better soldier. Sometimes she would catch Commander Thorne watching her during training, a thoughtful look on his face. He would often give her a respectful salute, and Elara would return it with a proud smile. Their relationship had changed from one of dismissal to one of mutual respect and friendship. He had seen her true strength, and in doing so, he had helped the entire base see it too. Elara's story became a legend on the base, passed down from older soldiers to new recruits. It was a tale of courage, smarts, and proving everyone wrong. She proved that even the smallest person could stand tall, and that true power came from within. And so, Alara continued her journey as a soldier, respected by all. A living example that bravery and skill were far more important than size. She was no longer just Alara. She was a hero.